everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com. We have some more news on the ongoing situation within WWE, as well as some of the response from various wrestlers who were released, the likelihood of where they might go. Certain wrestlers have been teasing things on social media, others have been sending out messages of thanks, so we'll take a little look at everything that's going on. So let's get straight into those headlines. First of all, we take a look at reportedly how much money WWE have actually saved with those cuts. Next up, a released superstar has teased a move to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And finally, sadly, legendary ring announcer Howard Finkel has passed away at the age of 69. So first of all, let's start by talking about how much money WWE are said to be saving, reportedly, with these cuts. This comes from Dave Meltzer, who seems to have quite a good grasp of the figure according to whichever sources he's used, or whether he's just added up the totals himself, I'm not quite sure. But he was speaking on Twitter in response to somebody mentioning the $4 million per month figure that had been floated about, people saying that WWE are going to save $4 million a month thanks to these roster cuts. Well, Meltzer replied, the talent cuts will save them about $703,000 per month. The $4 million total includes all expenses cut, including the expenses of moving into a new office. Now, obviously, that's in reference to WWE delaying the move out of Titan Towers into their new headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, which is one of the key things they mentioned in their press release as a means of cutting back on cost. This is important because the $4 million a month figure was being used a lot by people defending WWE, whereas here Meltzer seems to be implying that the figure is actually lower when you just take into account those wrestlers that were cut from the roster. But we can't, of course, forget about all the other employees of WWE who've lost their jobs as well, not just the wrestlers themselves, and even beyond the producers who were mentioned, the backstage producers who've been furloughed, and also people like Mike Chioda, and I can't remember her name, but the writer who tweeted saying she'd been released after writing the Otis and Mandy storyline, the very well received Otis and Mandy storyline as well. So let's now go to PW Insider, who first and foremost report that those who were furloughed were told the company hoped to have them back by July, and that the company would cover their benefits during this time. That's obviously a glimmer of good news in all of this, because furloughing means to put somebody on temporary leave, and it's nice to hear that WWE will be covering their benefits during this time. However, PW Insider also mentions in a bit of a cautionary tone, there are obviously a lot of people wondering if and when they will return to WWE. So now I feel like we should talk about the employees within WWE HQ themselves. A part of this story that I think has gone a little bit underreported, because obviously we've all been focusing on the big names that have been let go, whether they are active wrestlers currently or former wrestlers who are now in a producer role backstage who have been furloughed. But when it comes to maybe the WWE employees who aren't famous, who we don't know the names of, I think they need to be taken into account as well. And PW Insider's report continues with some very interesting information. They've said today WWE staff were acclimating themselves to the new normal of so much of the company being on furlough or just flat out let go. One person PW Insider spoke to felt at least 40% of the company was gone today versus yesterday. That's 40%. They've also had 4 different people mention having some form of survivor's guilt over friends and co-workers being gone while they are remaining in the company. The report also mentions that some of those who remain feel incredibly stressed because obviously there's less colleagues around them now, there's more work for each individual person, and there's less manpower to get it done. They also mention in the report that there were like heavy cuts across every division in WWE HQ, particularly the digital areas, and also of course live events, because live events are currently not going on. And yeah, that really is a shocking figure from that one source of PW Insider, saying that it feels as though 40% of WWE HQ is no longer there from one day to the next, just immediately overnight. It's quite a shocking and quite a serious development. So now I think it's time probably to focus on some good news and talk about one of the released wrestlers who seems to be implying that they may go to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's none other than the Machine Gun himself, Carl Anderson. Anderson tweeted out about a 20-second video on his Twitter, which you can see, where basically it depicts a journey to Tokyo, Japan, and then the words Machine Gun, which, you know, seems to imply that he'll be returning to Bullet Club in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, for those of you who may only be familiar with Carl Anderson in WWE, over in New Japan, he was, well, he certainly wasn't kind of on as low a tier as he was in WWE, despite, yes, I know, himself and Gallows being the best tag team in the world after winning that very irrelevant, competition in Saudi Arabia. But over in New Japan, Anderson is one of the original 4 founding members of the infamous Bullet Club faction. It was himself, Tama Tonga, Bad Luck Fale, and Prince Devitt, better known these days as Finn Balor. Now obviously Balor is now in WWE and has been for many years, specifically now on the NXT brand, but Tama Tonga and Bad Luck Fale are still very much part of Bullet Club. Bullet Club expanded in numbers quite a lot and changed over the years, with the likes of AJ Styles and Kenny Omega becoming, key figures in that group systematically over time. But now things have kind of changed, especially with AEW. The elite portion of the Bullet Club split away, and they basically went and formed AEW, and the remaining Bullet Club, the OGs as they call themselves, consists of like Tama Tonga, Tanga Loa, Bad Luck Fale, Jay White of course as well, former IWGP Heavyweight Champion. It looks as though from this video like Carl Anderson could be rejoining their ranks. And as I mentioned, this is particularly exciting to me because Carl Anderson, if this is true, would be rejoining Bullet Club, and 2 of the original founding members alongside himself would still be there in Tama Tonga and Bad Luck Fale. They are still very much key members of the Bullet Club faction because I know that personally. I've interviewed Tama Tonga and Bad Luck Fale and got incredibly drunk in Bad Luck Fale's bar. But just being with those guys over in Japan, it showed me how crucial they are to the New Japan setup. Despite, people like Kenny and the Bucks and Cody all leaving Bullet Club, there's still an importance around that faction in that promotion. Even before Carl Anderson's video on Twitter, you could argue that the wheels were already in motion because the night of all of these cuts in WWE, Tama Tonga tweeted out, the Bullet Club, the hand symbol, or the closest equivalent he could get on Twitter. And that seemed to imply, hey, the OC are going to come along and be with their boys once again. Now from one released WWE superstar to another, one who seemed very much like just entirely a company guy, having been part of the system for so very long and being such a reliable wrestler for that promotion. And it's none other than Heath Slater. Heath has commented on his release since being let go on Wednesday and has said the following: "The outpouring of love from the locker room, corporate staff and the WWE universe has been extremely overwhelming. I'm seeing now that it's like sometimes your accomplishments aren't always about what you do in the ring, but it's what you do behind the scenes for people around you." He goes on, "I had no idea how much love I had until yesterday, and that's the hardest part of letting go of this chapter of my life. I just want to say thank you to the WWE family. You gave me 14 years, and now come July 17th, I can spread my wings and fly a little bit, and I feel fire again that I didn't have for a little while. I feel ready to get in shape, and I feel hungry again, like very hungry, and I haven't felt that in a long time. Get ready for the encore, because I'm going to come back better than I ever was, and that's a fact." Now, I've seen a few conflicting reports and stories and stuff regarding the likelihood of a no-compete clause, but Slater's July 17th comment there does seem to suggest that there will be a 90-day no-compete clause for those wrestlers who have been let go. However, given the ongoing global circumstances, I don't even know how relevant that might be, because we don't know when live wrestling is going to return or when many of these promotions are going to resume normal business once again. So maybe the 90-day no-compete clause is a frustrating thing for fans of these wrestlers who want to see them back in action as soon as possible, or maybe on the other hand, it's not so frustrating because it doesn't really matter anyway, and we'll see them at some point in the near future. Next up, you may have seen the other day that Killer Kross made his debut finally after weeks of teasers and vignettes and little secretive appearances. He finally made his debut on NXT, the former Impact star attacking Tommaso Ciampa backstage. And now his first t-shirt is available on WWEshop.com, and it seems to imply that there's been a name change for Killer Kross. He is now called Karrion Kross. Karrion with a K, but it's normally spelled with a C, and it means, rotting, decomposing flesh. Lovely. The shirt also features the number 12 in Roman numerals, XII. That seems to be an implication about the vignettes that we saw where Killer Kross featured at first, or Karrion Kross I should say, where we didn't really see him very clearly at all, but there was like a clock ticking towards midnight. I wonder if midnight will be a key theme of his character going forwards. It all remains to be seen. And finally, tributes have been paid to the legendary ring announcer, the greatest ring announcer of all time, Howard Finkel, who sadly passed away yesterday at the age of 69. He was WWE's first employee, being hired by Vince Sr. in 1975 for the company then known as the WWF, and is also said to have been the man who came up with the name WrestleMania. He was the iconic voice of WWE's Madison Square Garden house shows and finally became the promotion's lead lead announcer in the year 2000. And because wrestling was so hot around then, and because he was so talented and so good at his job, he's become one of those voices like Jim Ross, like Mean Gene Okerlund, who's just like, you hear their voice and you just think professional wrestling. They're synonymous with the sport. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009 and made a few sporadic appearances here and there since then, but let's take a look at some of the tributes that have been paid to Finkel. Roman Reigns tweeted, "Even as Howard's health declined, he was more concerned about me and my fight to be healthy. We have lost one of the greatest ever. He was the greatest ring announcer ever, and that couldn't even compare to the human being that he was. R.I.P. Fink." Jim Ross tweeted, "So sad to hear of the passing of my friend, the greatest ring announcer in the biz, Howard Finkel, at the age of 69. The Hall of Famer is now ring announcing in heaven. No one was more loyal or loved pro wrestling more than the Fink." And Hulk Hogan tweeted, "Howard Finkel was on Team Hogan through the good and bad times." Now you might think, what does that mean? Is that a bit selfish? No, he makes it clear what he's referring to in a second. "Even when I was on the outs, Howard would call on a consistent basis to tell me to always keep my head up. It was never say never, and you and Vince will work it out. My good friend, R.I.P. I love you." Now, all of these tributes, and there's been many more as well, we've just picked a little selection there, but all of these tributes not only speak to how great Howard Finkel was at his job and at ring announcing, but also how great a person he was, and I think that's an incredible legacy for such a great man to leave. So my recommended match for you today, you can choose this one, but it has to be a match where Howard Finkel announced that somebody was the new champion, because that's one of those iconic calls in wrestling, isn't it? Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you very soon.